Zach, I have a joke that, unlike previous episodes, ties in very, very well to the episode, but I gotta warn you in advance. I guess more for the audience than you. It's a little distasteful. So,
okay,
you ready for it?
Yep, I'm ready for it.
Okay. What do a pregnant teenager and her unborn baby have in common?
I don't know.
Both of them are thinking, shit, my mother's gonna kill me.
I think I've heard something similar to that in the past.
Yes.
Some
This is not my
variation of
joke.
it.
That's not my joke. I stole it from somebody else. Not even like someone I know personally. Just I saw it on YouTube, and I thought it was funny. But more importantly, it the audience already knows. But if they don't know, you're about to share with them. It ties in perfectly with the episode.
Of course, yes, absolutely. Well, I will share with you guys what we're doing here today. Today we are back with part 2 of our abortion series, I guess. We're going to talk about a few things today we didn't talk about in the first episode. If you guys haven't seen that first episode, make sure you go back and listen to it. But my name is Zach. I am one of the hosts here of the Value Added Podcast. Of course, Bryan, the jokester, is our other host, the co-host of the podcast. So we're both here. We're both excited to talk about this topic, which, a lot of people think about this. I think a lot of people have this in their minds. For some of us, it's very close to home. I think that everyone listening to this has been not aborted. So, I mean, congratulations for making it past that hurdle in life. But that's the episode. So today we're just going to talk about and discuss a few more things that we didn't get a chance to go over last time. And it should be a good time. You want to add anything to that, Bryan?
I don't know if a good time is the right way to phrase it, but I don't really know what else I can add to it yet. I mean, it's... we knew this was going to be a multi-parter. We don't know whether it's going to be 2, 3, or even more than that. Depends how this episode goes. But it's not surprising that we got to go to at least the part 2 because this is a very heavy topic that has a lot of different ways that you can go into it. And if you don't cover as much of it as possible, it's very easy for somebody to misinterpret your position. Especially if they're trying to. And in a topic like this, that is a possible recipe for disaster. So you want to cover as many of the bases as you can.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about the rest of the points that I had from the last episode. You guys really should go back and listen to that just so you know what we're talking about today and that you can continue along with the conversation. And regarding to what you said, Bryan, I mean, there's always going to be things that we're not going to be able to touch on. Scenarios we're not going to be able to touch on, very particular policies or ideas that we're not going to be able to touch on. And that is why you guys should definitely reach out to us at valueadded.zb@gmail.com to let us know what we missed so we can continue that discussion, continue that conversation in the comment section on this video or otherwise on the Spotify. So just all of this is about let's have a conversation. Let's continue talking about this. Let's not have this as some kind of secret backdoor discussion. This needs to be out in the open. We need to talk about these things. I want people to be aware of the decisions that they're making, aware of the consequences of those decisions. And if you're going to have a stance, I want to make sure that your stance is solid, that you have solid footing. There's an old saying I heard, if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. So if you're one of those people who say, I don't know what to think about this topic, you kind of need to figure that out because this, at the fundamental core of it, it comes down to some moral principles that will dictate one way or the other. All right. So one of my favorite arguments about the pro-choice side, the pro-abortion side, is the fact that they describe the baby as a clump of cells. And I laugh because I watched something recently, and a guy he was a pro-life guy, and he was talking about the clump of cells thing, and he made the point that we're all clumps of cells. Some of us just more clumpy than others. I just found that really funny. so yeah, some of us are a bit more clumpy than others.
Not only attacking the pro-choice argument, but also being body shaming. So that's a double whammy for the liberal side.
Yes, giving a lot of ammunition for the other side to fight back on. But yeah. I mean, are we all clumps of cells? Yes, we are. I mean, that's just biology. Biologically, we are all clumps of cells. Describing a baby as a clump of cells is kind of like describing water as wet. which I apparently heard was a debate. People are debating whether or not water's wet. I didn't know that was a thing until recently. You have any take on water being wet, Brian? I know this has nothing to do with the topic, but I'm curious.
You could have given me a million guesses as to what kind of tangent this was going to go off to. I never would have got to this. But
Yeah.
to me, I don't know anything about this, but it doesn't surprise me, especially if this happens in like social media areas. And what there's two possibilities that come to mind immediately when I hear that. One, flat out trolling. You know, people get together and say, let's mock how stupid people are with some of the stuff that they try to argue, and give them an idea of how it sounds, what it sounds like, but we're going to make it sound as if we actually believe it, you know, kind of a spoof. The other possibility is that there are people who are trying to sound or appear super smart, super, like, more smart than everybody else.
Yes,
but they're
very
actually
insightful.
not. Right, but they're actually not. So they are, the way that they're demonstrating this is to come up with like these thoughts that nobody else has ever had before, and then like doubling down on them and then pushing them out there to get, in the hope that the other people who listen to that say, oh my God, I never thought about that before. This person's really profound. This person's really deep. This person's really intelligent, so on and so forth. When meanwhile, what they're really thinking is the exact opposite of that, which is you're a freaking moron.
Yeah. I mean, how many dumb things can you think of trying to start an argument about? You know, it just is dirty. I don't know. Just whatever weird thing that you want to come up with. To the water, is water wet? By the way, I would say I'm on the side of yes, it is. I don't know how many people are on the side of no, it isn't. I don't know. Anyway, moving on from that point. Clump of cells, Brian. Do you have anything that you want to add to that before I move on to the next question, the next statement?
In the first episode, I didn't really share my opinion much. My main focus in the first episode of this series was criticizing the argument that happens around abortion. Because, to sum up, both sides argue two different things, pretend that they don't. And because both sides can't agree on certain fundamental baselines, the conversation gets lost. But I also was critical of specific points that the pro-choice side says, because those points, when they use those to support their position, however strong it might have been to begin with, becomes even weaker if they use those supports as their, proof that their position makes more sense, whatever. And that point that you just said is one of those things. I didn't mention it, I don't think, in the first episode. I mentioned other things, but that is a position that they take. To me, if I was someone who wanted the pro-choice side to like win out over the pro-life side, I would hear somebody say that and tell them, no, stop, don't do that. That is hurting your argument. If you're trying to win the debate, win the game, so to speak, you're losing points with that argument, because it doesn't hold a lot of water. You don't wet water, not the not wet water.
Correct.
Yes, and just as importantly, most of the time, the people who say it don't always believe that. They just believe it in the context of abortion. If you ask them, or not even asking them, if it just comes up somehow in a conversation other than abortion, they won't look at a baby as a clump of cells. They would look at a baby as the way the pro-life side looks at a baby in general. Just showing when abortion comes up, it's how can I make my abortion stance more justifiable? Oh, let me just say it's a clump of cells. Obviously, not everyone is that contradictory, but a lot of people are. And when you see that, it's very hard to sort through it, and then you kind of just dismiss the whole thing. So anyone who's listening to this who wants to take a pro-choice stance, but a strong pro-choice stance, my advice is stay away from the clump of cells. Babies is a clump of cells argument, because it's stupid.
I'll give you one that I can add to that, which is the whole, have you ever seen like soda commercials where something might be described as refreshing? A certain soda might be described as refreshing. Refreshing isn't the best way to describe them, because if we're just caring about refreshment, what is going to hydrate me, for example, water is going to be a much better hydrating thing than something that's full of corn syrup and sugars and everything else, like a soda is. So that's kind of along the same vein of what you're talking about. I just thought of something, by the way, as well, when you started making the joke about the wet water. You've heard of a dry martini, right? I've heard of this. I'm sure you've heard of it as well.
I have.
What even is that? I don't even know what that is.
I was about to ask you that. I don't know. Does it mean no ice?
I don't know. I don't know. But if you guys know, the listeners, of course, email us at valueadded.zb@gmail.com and let us know what a dry martini is. I mean, of course, we could look it up, but
we're not going to.
No, we're not going to do that. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was so this one is kind of related to the last one. A baby in the womb isn't a person. This is something you'll hear sometimes. It's not a person. My question is, right, if it's not a person, what is it? Because this gets into, how are we going to define something? Usually we define things as, is something inanimate, is something alive, is something dead. I would say that's, off the top of my head, that's 3 easy categories I can give that I'm pretty sure could describe almost anything around you. Is it dead, alive, or inanimate? All right? Those are your options, okay? And if you're saying it's not alive, then which one is it of those other 2 options? Is it inanimate, like a phone, like a cup, or is it dead? And if it's dead, we know this, dead things can't come to life. So that argument automatically goes away because the baby's going to be born and going to become alive by your own logic. So where exactly does that stance hold water? Wet water, of course.
Like, we don't use that expression much, and now we've used it twice already in this episode.
I know. It's like when you see a red car, and you never really see red cars that often, so you don't think about it. It's like, oh, there's a red car. Next thing you know, you're seeing them all over the place.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, so it's, I guess the second question I want to ask to that, besides, because that's a good first question to ask, is if it's not a person, then what is it? My other question to that would be, if it's not a person, then at what point is it a person? Mm-hmm. And the problem with this, and maybe problem's not the right word, but right away you can kind of see how this abortion conversation gets very muddy, because even people who are on the same side, let's assume for the moment that there's pro-life and pro-choice and there's only 2 sides. There really isn't. It's not even close to that. But to make this simple, let's just say that it is. Even if on the pro-choice side and the pro-life side, but put the pro-life side away for the moment because they're not really the ones who are fiddling with the whole personhood thing. Let's stick to the pro-choice side. Pro-choice side who says it's not a person. Even among that group, if you ask them for a follow-up of what is a person, they might give you a different answer. Some of them might say viability. Some of them might say consciousness. Some of them might say after a specific developmental period, after the first trimester, after the second trimester, whatever. So even amongst people who are saying pro-choice and it's not a person, and the assumption or the implication from that argument is you're allowed to kill it if it's not a person, but once it becomes a person, then you can't really kill it anymore. Mm-hmm. But if that's the implication, and everyone, even on that side, doesn't agree on where the personhood starts, then where do you draw the line there? Because then can the 2 people who are on the pro-choice side, can one person attack the other one for saying because you're too far ahead, or you're not far ahead, so you're really not pro-choice, you're pro-life because you are advocating for non-abortion way earlier than I would like you to, so on and so forth, and now there's more division. So once you get to the point of personhood, if we can't all agree on where personhood starts, this whole abortion conversation gets even more muddy because now it's within the people who are supposed to be on the same side.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what you're talking about. Kind of reminds me of the defense for the Second Amendment, which of course I'm a defender of. Where you might say if you were in favor of any regulation on guns, you're not pro Second Amendment. You're somehow anti-gun. If you think that people should have to have a waiting period of 3 days before they buy one, then you're somehow anti-gun.
It's a false dichotomy.
It's a false dichotomy. It is 100% a false dichotomy where people want to throw people and you can only be in these 2 camps. You can't be in anything else. There's variations. There's levels. And I have more, I don't think respect is the best word for it. I think I have more understanding for someone who finds themselves in the middle on certain issues, whether it be guns or abortion, because you're trying to consider things, but you haven't quite figured out where you want to be. You should try to figure that out, but I have more understanding than someone who's just, I'm just going to go pro, all in on one side without giving it any thought, because, that's what I want to do. That's what I feel like doing emotionally. I don't know.
That's the team I'm on. I'm on the team that, the team that believes these 4 things also believes this about gun regulations. I'm just going to stick with them because I want to stick to their jersey. That's the sports aspect to it.
Yep. So I'll give you the next one I have on here, which is, and you hinted at it, consciousness. Okay, the consciousness debate. Personally, I find to be really, really dumb, and the reason I find it to be dumb is because it's easy to say, "Hey, a baby's not conscious," and let's say, for example, for the sake of this argument, let's say I agree with you. Let's say that babies are not conscious, and they become conscious. Let's say the moment they are born. Let's say that's all true. Should we kill something because it's not conscious? I mean, right, because if you think about this, what is the point of this argument? If someone says it's not conscious, that's why we can kill it, then let's take that to all the rest of the logical areas that goes to. Have you ever been drunk and passed out before? Guess what? You're not conscious. Have you ever had a loved one fall into a coma and they're in the hospital? Guess what? They're not conscious. Have you ever had a loved one or yourself have surgery before? You're not conscious. But wait, there's one more that I want to point out that might be inconvenient for every human being listening to this, which is, have you ever slept before? You were unconscious. Okay? So if we're just doing the idea of if someone is unconscious at any point in time, then while they are unconscious, they can be killed. This argument completely falls apart because we've all experienced it our entire lives, levels or certain times of unconsciousness. Now, there's, of course, the argument of this isn't necessarily about abortion, but this is more about just the consciousness point, so I just want to make it real quick. Someone is on life support. They're unconscious, they're on life support. Maybe the doctor has declared them brain dead or something else. They don't think that they're going to wake up, so you have the option to pull in the plug. In other words, you're terminating their life. You have the option to do so because they're requiring machines in order to stay alive. In those circumstances, do you think it's appropriate to pull the plug? At what point is it appropriate to pull the plug? What's interesting about consciousness, I think, in our modern day and age is that even though we've made extreme advancements in things like understanding what's going on in the human body, knowing, for example, because we're talking about pregnancy, when and what stages a baby is in development, one thing we haven't actually made a lot of stride on is consciousness, understanding what consciousness is, how complex it is, how it works, what defines consciousness versus not. We can't really say whether animals or other things that are technically alive by that definition are conscious. That's a very difficult thing to do. So we're still in the process scientifically of figuring that complex puzzle out. Anyway, there was something else I want to say. It escapes me.
Okay, so yes, I'll take the reins here. So there's kind of a side note, because not related to abortion specifically, but since you mentioned it, I think it's a good way to kind of just point it out. Because you mentioned, when someone says that, let's take it to the logical end of how else this applies. And I think just in general, not just with abortion, a lot of times people make this error where they take a stance on something that is specific to that specific thing that they're talking about, but don't think the logic all the way through to its conclusion. Because once you do that, you realize that the initial stance you just took contradicts a previous position that you had. Might not be what you actually believe. It just fits a certain agenda or a narrative right now. Doesn't make a lot of sense, whatever. But it might make sense just within that narrow context. So it's important, regardless of what the position is, what you're talking about, that whenever you take a stance, you take it to its logical conclusion. That's a way to kind of test to see if it is consistent, if it makes sense, so on and so forth. Now, of course, a lot of people don't give a shit about any of that. They don't care about logic. They care about their feelings. But that's a whole other thing. What you touched on, though, is one of the issues with the whole consciousness argument. Because any kind of rationale you can use to say consciousness means this, you can take that and apply to something that is not an unborn baby. You can, once the baby's born and now the baby becomes a human in your eyes, there's a scenario that plays out that can match what you qualifies as not being conscious. And Zach just touched on a lot of them. Being in a coma, being asleep, going under for surgery, whatever. Now, of course, you can counter some of these and say, I don't count being asleep because of being transient. I think that's the word. I might not be using the right word.
Okay.
So
Talk about it for a sec. What does that mean? What does it mean when they say that?
Well, I guess the simple way I can describe it is when people talk about consciousness, they don't always talk about just being awake or not awake. I think it's kind of another way of saying it, like being aware, I guess. Where like, and that's kind of the thing that when you say about animals unconscious, they don't mean they're not literally alive and their heart's beating and they're walking around and doing their thing, but they lack the other ability to like have that deeper awareness that humans have, and humans don't get that right away. Like if you think back to whoever's listening to this, think back to your first memory. It wasn't popping out of the womb, surviving the abortion, good job. But it was what, 2.5, 3.5, when you first started, like when the light bulb clicked, like turned on, and suddenly like you were now living as you, and then from then on you would continue living at like through, you saw the world through your own eyes and so on and so forth. But before that, you were alive. Other people saw you and interacted with you, and you seemed to interact with them, but you had no consciousness of it. Like you weren't really, you have no memory. You didn't really know what you were doing. You were kind of just, I don't know if it was instinct. There's I guess a complicated scientific explanation for this. So that's another thing people use when they say consciousness. The problem with that one is if you argue that is what you were saying for consciousness, then you can justify killing someone at 1.5 years old. Because they're not conscious until 2 or 2.5, or even if they're not, even if you say, well, not everyone is conscious at 2.5. Okay, but if everyone has different levels of consciousness, then sometimes you can kill them but not kill them, depending on consciousness, which cannot be definitively measured. So then that gets even more tricky. So the problem with the conscious argument is the same problem I have with the argument that I was saying before about, everyone has a different kind of line in terms of when it goes from not a person to a person. Even if we all agree, consciousness is the point where you have to go from it's acceptable to kill them to it's not acceptable is consciousness. Even if we all agree on that. Okay, where's the line though? Again, even people on the same side might say something different. Some people might say viability again. Some people might say after the first trimester. Some people might say after 7 months. Some people might say the second they're born. Some people might say not till 3.5 years. Some people might say not till 8. I don't know who would say that. But once you get to all those different things, then how do you decide when it's acceptable and when it's not? So this is the problem I have with a lot of them is even if some of it makes sense, if it's not consistent across the board, it's hard to apply.
I want to talk about this a little bit more because you're bringing up a lot of things that I find personally really interesting. The whole consciousness debate I find really interesting, not just, of course, in the context of abortion, but just in general.
Same.
Are we conscious? Are we here? Are we people? And what's interesting about the idea of consciousness is that it's so very difficult to explain whether or not you, Bryan, feel the same level of consciousness that I do. I infer that, I empathize and have that feeling that you do, but that's actually impossible for me to prove. When we talk about things that are alive, does everything that's alive have consciousness? I mean, trees are alive, they grow. Plants are alive, they grow. Do they have consciousness? Do they feel things around them? Do they have any kind of emotion? We don't know those answers. I don't think that there's a way to know those answers. But what you're talking about, I think you're pointing at kind of memory connection being, can I remember doing something? And if I can remember it, then that proves a sort of consciousness. I don't think that was your opinion, but that was the position that you were laying out. That's correct?
I mean, I guess not. I guess kind of, but the problem with strictly connecting that to memory is that some people just have bad memories.
Yeah, we actually talked about this before the episode.
Yes, right. So
peel back the curtain here.
I guess it's not just having a good memory or a bad memory, because then that would be, well, if I'm 30, I just forgot something that I did when 2 days ago. I wasn't conscious during that time. That doesn't really make sense. So it's more to like, I guess, a capacity than it is anything else. But continue what you were saying. But
and again, capacity is another great one, because even though you might say, Bryan, because my youngest memory was definitely not 2.5, but it was much later in my life than that. If you have memories for being 2.5, here's the interesting thing. Your level of consciousness, your level of understanding of the world around you, and even understanding of yourself was very, very limited when you probably had that first memory at 2.5 years old. Do you remember how long your fingernails were? Do you remember the idea that you had fingernails, that they were even a thing? Did you even care to look at your fingernails to know that there was something there? Probably not, because it's so insignificant to someone who's just brand new and trying to figure out the world around them. It's a very insignificant detail. As an adult, it's very easy to look down. If I say, look at your fingernails, you can look at your fingernails and see what they are, and you know where they are, you know how long they are, you know how to do these mental computations and understand that that is the reality you're living in. That is currently right now, that's my reality. When you're that age, you can't understand that. And even when you're older, say you're 10 years old, say you're 18 years old, say you're 18 years old, right? Because we talk about this as the legal policy and everything else. You're 18 years old and you make a financial decision to buy something. Okay, does your conscious ability to make that decision have the same validity to your conscious ability at the age of 40 to make that exact same financial decision? A lot of people would say, well, no, because you have life experience and you've learned, what you should do and shouldn't do, and you've learned responsibility. Okay, fine. But if we're going to say all that, wouldn't it be fair to also say that someone at 40 years old is therefore more conscious than someone at 18 years old? It becomes really difficult. And I think this all kind of points to why it's been so incredibly difficult for scientists to quantify what it means to be conscious. So when I see an argument like this used in the abortion case, abortion's okay because the baby's not conscious, it's just a really weak argument. I think a lot of the arguments are weak. As a matter of fact, I think all of them are. But this one is just definitely one that I find not very compelling at all.
Yeah, I mean, if the scientists can't narrow in on what it means, then how is someone who's not a scientist or someone who is not a thinker or anything like that supposed to have the answer? So when I hear that, a lot of times what it seems to me is they're desperately trying to justify abortion but still keeping the moral high ground that they believe that they have. And by they, I don't mean just pro-choice people, because a lot of times people who are pro-choice are on the certain side of the political spectrum who also take who have this big belief that like they're morally superior. The other side believes that they're intellectually superior, and this side believes they're morally superior. So they want to be able to justify something that is hard to justify as moral, but keep their moral superiority. So they latch on to different things, throwing everything at the wall, seeing what sticks, and so they try consciousness. And consciousness has some validity to it in terms of like how you can frame that, especially if you're a very skilled speaker. You can frame that in a way where it sounds like it's legitimate as a justification for abortion. And then you hear that and you say, well, that's what I wanted all along. I want to justify it, so let's just go with that. But until you pick it apart, you realize it's a little tricky. Now, one of the counters I have to point out to what Zach and I both mentioned, which is anytime any argument that you can use to justify an abortion can also apply to adults after they're born, that suddenly you won't justify killing anymore, like being in a coma, things like that. And one of the counters you hear to that is, well, in the case of the adult who was in a coma, they were conscious, they had a conscience before the experience, and now they don't, so it's different. And whenever I've heard that, I haven't heard someone say it to me directly. I've heard it like in debates or conversations I've heard that I wasn't a part of, but I just like listened to the conversation. And my reaction every time I heard this is, why does that matter though? Why is it because you experienced consciousness first and then you lost it? Now your life is valuable and you can't kill it. But if you've never experienced it yet, but you will, that justifies killing. And the only thing I could think of is it doesn't. It's just another way to latch on to a justification for abortion. And
I think it's I'll interject real quick. I think it's a kind of misguided sense of empathy where you think to yourself, well, if I've experienced life, I wouldn't want my life to be cut out. But if I've never experienced life, then I don't know what I'm missing. So in a way, in just a way of like projecting your own empathy onto something else, I get why someone might have that opinion. I agree with you that it really doesn't make a difference. It doesn't matter, and I also wanted to point out something else when it comes to this conversation, which is the mentally ill, the mentally handicapped might not have the same, we could argue they don't have the same level of consciousness as another person. But we don't even know that. We can't even say that. You see someone who has Down syndrome or they have, whatever. There are various different mental Why am I having such a hard time? Why am I having such a hard time here? Anyway, there are a lot of different mental illnesses that people can have, and we don't know their level of consciousness. My wife, her cousin had a daughter. She was completely mute. She wasn't able to move. She was blind, I think mostly blind or completely blind, I'm not sure. But she was completely mute, couldn't speak, couldn't move, intellectually very, very slow on her development. She died at a very young age, medical complications. Are we going to look at her, that girl who was obviously suffering a lot, probably completely internally? We have no idea. We have no idea the extent of her suffering because we just can't know that. We're going to look at that girl and say, well, she died at the age of like 16, 17 years old. Doesn't matter if we were just kill her at when she was 12, when she was 14, when she was 16. Doesn't matter if she's never experienced consciousness in the same way that all the rest of us do. And I bring that up because for that girl in particular, or for anyone in the similar situation, they've never quite reached that point of consciousness as some people might define it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Okay, so I have ways I can respond to this. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack there. But everyone, we're going to take a small break, a little breather, so everyone can, get their exploding head and put it back together and calm down a little bit. Not me and Zach, we're fine, but who knows what the audience is and how they're reacting to this. But don't think that it's over, because it's not. It's just on hold for the moment. So we'll be back after these brief messages from our local sponsor / podcast host.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Random Advice with Zach. My name is Zach. This is some random advice. This advice here, I think it pertains to this episode. It also pertains to pretty much everything in life, and you'll understand why in a second. I teach this to my kids from a very young age. Everyone who's listening to this should have heard this. Unfortunately, everyone who's listening to this has not been following this. And that is the golden rule: treat others how you would like to be treated. Okay? You've all heard this before. You've heard it a million times. But I don't think it's really sunk in for a lot of people. I can tell you it didn't sink in for that guy I was driving next to earlier in traffic. And I'll tell you this because when you think and you live your life with the idea of treating others how you want to be treated, you're not going to be the one cutting people off in traffic. You're not going to be the one skipping people in lines. You're not going to be the one, just being belligerent or cussing at a worker at a restaurant or something because you didn't get your food the way you wanted it to be. Because you empathize. You put yourself in their shoes. Would you want to be the person standing behind that counter getting yelled at? Would you want to be the car that has to slam on their brakes because someone cuts them off? No, you wouldn't. So treat other people how you want to be treated. Don't just hear me say this and then go on about your life. Take a moment to really consider. Ask yourself the question, are you doing that? And if you're upset with the way that other people treat you, if you're upset with the things that you see in society, be the first person to make the change that you want to see out there. Okay? That's it. Back to the show.
Wait a second, Zach. I'm a little confused by... You start off by saying that it's related to the episode. I'm not really sure how, but it's better that it's not. Otherwise, it would not qualify as random advice. So, fine.
I can explain it to you.
I look forward to that explanation. The one little asterisk or caveat I want to add to that advice, which is obviously good advice, and it's advice that, almost every parent teaches their kids at the beginning, even if the parent themselves don't believe it or don't follow it. It's just a good thing to say.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that has to be added in at some point is treat everyone the way you want to be treated, but that doesn't mean you treat everybody the same. Because you may not necessarily want each individual person to treat you the exact same way. So for example, the people that are close to you, have a personal relationship to you, or you want to have some kind of close relationship with, you may treat way differently than, a random customer who comes into the store that you work at and you're never going to see again. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that because a random customer is not important to you or whatever, that you'd be a complete asshole to them. You'd be rude to them, anything like that. It doesn't mean that. But you don't have to go to the same level of treatment to this person as you do to those other people, because to you, they're just random customer. You're going to see once, never again. They are just a customer. They don't have any kind of personal connection to you. So, bare minimum. But a sibling, a spouse, a friend, someone who you want to become a spouse or a friend, co-workers who you're gonna spend a lot of time with, bosses who you want to suck up to, whatever it is, you're gonna treat them a little differently. So treat everyone the way you want to be treated. always sounds like a universal thing, which is treat everyone exactly. You want to be treated with respect, so treat everyone with respect. Like whatever the hell that means. So I just want to add the caveat that it also means that doesn't mean treat everyone the same. Each individual person has a certain way you want them to treat you. Treat that person that way. There you go.
Since you elaborate on the point, which I appreciate because I agree with everything you said there, I want to elaborate on the point as well. Elaborate on my own point.
Elaborate on the elaboration.
And the way I want to elaborate, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to focus in on one word, which is want. Treat others how you want to be treated. Now, this one is key because you're not going to treat other people how they're going to treat you, okay? It's not a guarantee. What you do to other people, how you treat other people, there's no guarantee that it's going to be reciprocated. As a matter of fact, I can stand here right now or sit here in this chair and guarantee you that it won't be reciprocated 100% of the time because that's the world we live in. But you do it because you desire to be treated a different way than you're being treated right now. You desire to be treated a way that's whatever. Like you said, it's very situational, whether it's someone close to you or someone that's a stranger. Basic respect, like holding the door for a stranger if you're walking into a business. That's, you do that for a stranger because you would expect that in return from that same stranger. That's a normal thing to expect in society. That's not some kind of weird, outrageous thing. But I'm not buying chocolates on Valentine's Day for random strangers. I don't expect them to do that to me.
Right,
okay.
Right.
So yeah, that's good. It was good points, a good segment. I'll pat myself on the back for it. Good segment, good points. I appreciate the feedback.
Awesome. So now let's get back to the crux of this episode here, and no more lightheartedness. Back to the heavy. So I'm not really sure exactly where to go from what you said, but so far we've touched on kind of what I was leaning into a lot in the first episode, which is a critique of the pro-choice side specifically. Obviously, there's problems with the pro-life side, especially with the people who claim that they value all life, but really don't. They're kind of virtuing in their own way. But it's harder, I think, to find an inconsistency or a contradiction in the pro-life side than it is the pro-choice side, because the pro-life side is advocating for something that is hard to claim that's immoral in general, because what the pro-life side is saying is this is a human life, let's not kill it. The pro-choice side is trying to justify killing a human life by claiming it's not a human life, or coming up with different reasons or different scenarios to make it not a human life to further justify it and all that. So it becomes harder to appreciate the pro-choice side, mainly because of the steps that they take to support their position. I would much rather somebody just come out and say, yeah, it's a human life, but I don't give a shit. Like if I or another someone who's not me gets pregnant and I don't want to carry the baby for whatever the reason, survival of the fittest. I'm older, I'm bigger, I'm stronger, and I don't want to carry you, so it sucks to suck. You don't have to say that harshly, of course, but if you take that position, I would have much more respect for that position because it's more honest, it's more transparent, it's actually even more consistent because we know exactly where you stand on it. But to try and fluff up all these different things, throw out all these possible scenarios to justify it, all it screams at me is, that it's at least potentially immoral, what you're advocating for, but you want to do it anyway, or advocate for it, but still be moral. So to do that, you try and change the rules, change definitions, change your own beliefs to fit this specific thing, and so you can have both. And when I see somebody doing that or attempting to do that, automatically I'm like, it's bad for the pro-choice argument as a whole, but it also makes you look like a hypocrite.
There's a lot of things that people argue about that I think people are just approaching with bad faith. You've talked about bad faith recently in a couple episodes we've done. I think that this is obviously another topic that people approach with bad faith. And really what you're saying, Brian, is I think 100% true. And I don't think there's any debate with the people who actually have the view of, I want to fight for abortion because I want the freedom and the flexibility of choice that allows me. I think that they're just not willing to say the quiet part out loud, which is their actual motivation reason for doing so. A person who's overweight is not going to go and eat 25 cheeseburgers at McDonald's and say and tell themselves, well, I'm doing this because I need to get more vitamin D in my diet. No, they're not. They can say that, but that's not the reason. That's not why they're there stuffing their face. They're stuffing their face because they want the food. Okay, that's why they're stuffing their face. Anyone can see that, but yet they can make up these ridiculous arguments. Guys, I don't think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I watch a lot of on YouTube or stuff like that in my spare time. I watch legal proceedings, like court cases. I enjoy watching certainly. I watched a video recently about a lot of the kind of really arbitrary, weird court cases that have been won, suits against companies. You guys probably remember, if depending on how old you are, you might remember the Subway footlong lawsuit. You might remember the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit. What was the other one? Red Bull gives you wings. You might remember that lawsuit, right? And all of it comes down to bad faith, right? Red Bull doesn't give you wings, you idiot. You obviously know this, right? You cannot possibly not know that you're going to drink a beverage and suddenly wings are going to spread out of your back, okay? You're only doing what you're doing because you see an opportunity to take advantage of a loophole that exists in the law, in the legal system, or otherwise. You're trying to enrich yourself. You're trying to do something for yourself on the basis of something that is just, and everyone can obviously see that it's BS, right? And I think abortion the same way. Abortion's very similar to these legal proceedings in the fact that you want to kill your kid. You know what you're doing. I don't think there's any confusion. You know what you're doing. For the most part, there might be a couple people out there who don't know, but I think that there's been enough people talking about pro-life and enough knowledge about it, and especially in the day and age we are now with medical knowledge, I think enough people know what they're doing that ignorance is not the reason why it's happening. It's a matter of choice, and you're saying, yeah, I want to finish my college degree. Yes, I want to continue to party. Yes, I want to continue to have my freedom. No, I'm not financially ready or stable to have a child. So I'm going to do this. I know it's bad, but I'm going to do it. I don't think it's talked about nearly enough, but there's a lot of regret when it comes to abortions. Almost exclusively for the women, but there's still men. There's men out there as well who have talked to their girlfriends into having an abortion, and they later on regret it. They'll come on talk shows. I've seen interviews with men. I've seen tons of interviews with women who talk about the regret that happens after the fact. You can't escape it. You are cutting a life short at literally the beginning. That is going to stay with you for the rest of your life, and is going to stay in the back of your mind. And by the way, I'll make one quick point about the whole, at least I'll debunk one argument, which is the whole I'm not ready argument. 13-year-old girl gets pregnant. She has to abort the baby. She can't handle that. Hopefully that 13-year-old girl has the right support systems in place to be able to help her throughout that, the right medical care to make sure that she can get through the process of pregnancy. It's unfortunate it shouldn't happen, but if it did happen, that's what you have to do. That is the humane thing to do. But no one, and let me clarify this, no one is ever going to be ready for a child, okay? You're just not. You're just not, okay? You might think, you could read every single childhood development book that exists out there, and you're still going to be surprised at something your kid does or says. You could know all the things about psychology and this and that and nutrition, but you could still have your kid hate everything that you make them for dinner. Okay? Being a parent is a constant learning curve. It's a constant battle of trying to figure things out. How do I do this? How am I successful at it? You want to talk about finances? I can't have a kid right now because I don't have enough money. Okay, well, guess what? By the time you have enough money, if you really do have like a cutoff, and you're not just using that as an excuse, if you actually have a cutoff and you say, I need to have a very specific amount in my bank account before I can have a kid. If that's really where you're at, I would love to see, once you get to that point, that never in the rest of your life are you going to have financial troubles or worries again. You are. That's just the way life works. Unless you're uber rich, you're going to have financial ups and downs. You're going to have worries. You're going to have things come up. Money as an excuse is a very poor one. Anyway, back to you, Brian. I ramble on too much.
Well, we both have a lot to say about this topic. So, and I still haven't gotten to what you wanted from this episode, which is my opinion, but I'll get to that in a moment. 3 points I want to make from what you said. Number one, I'm going to throw an olive branch to the side we're attacking. Because I don't think in most cases, their mindset is, I want to kill my kid. I don't think they look at it that way.
Yeah, it's something else.
I don't think they look at it that way. I don't think they look at it in like a serial killer way where it's like, I want this kid to die. I don't think they look at it that way. I think they look at it as their hierarchy. What's best for them is way more important. And if it's at the expense of a life that they have not seen, they have not bonded with, they have not heard or anything like that, then all the better if it makes their life easier. So yeah, so I don't think it's a matter of I just want to kill this fucking kid. It's I need to take care of whatever's best for me. It's selfish, but it's not. I don't want to take the extra leap and say that they're deliberately trying to kill kids. But now let's go back to attacking that side, because one pet peeve that I have. This doesn't apply just to the pro-choice side and just to abortion. It's a pet peeve in general, but it applies to what one of the things Zach said is when people do something. Remember, a lesson I've said many, many times. There's two reasons why people do something. The reason they say it out loud, the reason they don't say it out loud. But a pet peeve of mine is when people harp so much on the reason they say out loud and pretend that is their only reason for doing it and double down on it and triple down on it, even though the reason they don't say out loud is obvious that reason exists. Even if it's not the main reason, even if it's there, they'll deliberately and willingly pretend that reason is not there. And you see that with really any example, but in the case of something like abortion, where they'll say, or actually, let's go to the McDonald's example, where they'll come up with some kind of explanation where what they're doing is some kind of like public service, something heroic, and something so selfless and amazing that they actually need to get credit for it, when either that's a small part of their reason, or it's most likely nothing to do with it at all, but they pretend that is actually their whole reason. It's infuriating to me because most people don't call them out on the bullshit, or if they do, the person who's being accused of it will never admit it. So it's a kind of a fruitless pursuit. But to the one of the last points you made, the I'm not ready thing, let's put rape to the side, because obviously what I'm about to say does not apply to a person being raped. But what is strange to me about the I'm not ready argument is if you are not ready to have a kid, kids don't just like fall out of the sky into your vagina and now you're pregnant. So if you're not ready to have the kid, which like you said, Zach, is probably true for everyone, but especially true at a really young age, then there are ways to guarantee that doesn't happen. Again, putting rape to the side. So if that's the case, then it's hard to, if you engage in the specific activity, it's only one, it's not like all these different things you can do. It's not like if you drink 4 Gatorades, you're going to get pregnant. There's a specific thing that you can do that will go, the chances that go from 0 to not 0, that you'll get pregnant, which you're not ready for, you can just not do that thing. And if you want to do it...
Yeah, let me interject for 1 second just to clarify, in case anyone's confused, and especially in case my daughter's listening to this. Holding hands is how you get pregnant, just yes, so everyone knows, all right?
Exactly.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yes. So now if you want to do that thing, fine. No problem. But then it's hard for a lot of people on the pro-life side especially to then look at you with sympathy when the result of that is a pregnancy and you say, I'm not ready. So you're ready to do the activity, but not ready for the aftermath of the activity. To me, this is kind of like when somebody has a pet and then they're abusive to the pet. I hate this fucking dog. Then why'd you get a dog? No one forced you to get a dog. It's not like it's a requirement to live on that street. You have to have a pet. You consciously went to the pet store, got a dog, brought it home, and then said, I don't want a fucking dog. Then you either shouldn't have got a dog or get rid of the dog not in a murder way, but give it to somebody else if you don't want the responsibility. But people do certain things, at least with a certain result. They complain about the result, but all they had to do is not do that thing originally, but they want to do that thing and they want to justify it. So that's another problem I have with the pro-choice argument. Now, before I go into my opinion, because my opinion is a little lengthy, I'll give you a chance to respond to that, but those are the points I took from what you said.
All right. I'm really drawing a blank right now regarding what I can respond. I agree with the points you're bringing up. I think you're bringing up good stuff to bring up. I'll just shoot it back over to you. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about your thoughts and opinions. Okay. Maybe what we can do is we can get into some examples and we can talk about how we might approach these examples or talk about some of the nuance involved in those examples. You know what I'm talking about,
yes.
Brian.
Okay, so from these first 2 episodes, a lot of you have probably come up with a idea of what my opinion is. Especially if you got to do the whole pro-life, pro-choice camp bullshit, which is you must be one or the other. And if you're in those camp, you've already decided on pro-life. Now, I'm going to say to that, I don't believe in the whole you got to be one or the other. Really, with anything, it's called a false dichotomy, as I mentioned before. But even if we were going in that camp, I still wouldn't be pro-life. And here's why. My opinion, which has been very hard for me to articulate out loud, so hopefully I can do it well here, is I don't think abortion should be illegal. I don't think abortion should be banned. And I'm not even just talking about for rape and incest. If abortion is one of those things that exists as an option, I don't really have a problem with that being an option. What I would like to see, an idealistic view, is people change their perception of abortion overall. So most people just flat out don't get it because they realize that they don't need it. They realize that it's what it actually entails. They realize that they kind of take the pro-life approach to abortion, which is there's a human life in here. Whether I was ready for it or not, it's here now. I have a responsibility to at least carry the term. There's adoption. There's a lot of different options you can do, but I'm not killing a human life. That's a basic, oversimplified idea of what I would like the society to be at. So, in other words, abortion is available as an option. Most people aren't going to take it because their perception of abortion has changed so much that now they're like, I'm not going to do this. I wasn't raped. The baby's not going to be have some kind of deformity. It's not the life of the mother is not at risk. It's not a controlling women type of approach to have a ban on abortion. It's just as simple as human life. I don't want to kill it, so that's it. That's what I would like. So because of that, I have no problem having abortion legal, especially if people are going to take that approach. The problem is a lot of people don't take that approach. So it's one of those things where it's like you can't have nice things, so that the nice thing goes away. When an option like this becomes available, rather than it being used in a good faith way where it's just in the cases that almost everyone would agree is a understandable position to take this step because it's a tragic situation all around. There's not really an easy answer. Doesn't really seem like anyone is going to come out of it in a good way. So this might be the best of terrible options. Rather than it being that, it's I had a one night stand and I regret it. I cheated on my boyfriend and I don't want him to find out. I'm gonna get cut out of the will if I got pregnant too soon. I'm supposed to be finishing school and all these different possible scenarios. So I'm just gonna get an abortion. So because people are taking it too lightly, they're taking it like it's a like going to CVS and getting over-the-counter medicine. Because of that, sometimes the solution to that is now you don't get it at all. You abuse the privilege. You mistook it as a right instead of a privilege. Thousands of babies, millions of babies are dead as a result. So guess what? You don't get it at all. So that is what I look at it. That's how I see the abortion atmosphere being right now, which is you abused it, so now you don't get it at all. And that is interpreted as, from that side, is you don't want us to have choices. Instead of it just being, well, maybe if you guys didn't abuse it to begin with, you wouldn't have lost it. So that's where I stand with it. I think it should be legal, but understand why people are pushing for it not to be, because us crazy American Western adults cannot handle a good thing, honestly and in good faith. We have to abuse it, so now we don't get it at all.
It's thank you for sharing your opinion. I would love to kind of dig down a little bit deeper and find out a little more information. There's definitely deeper we can go on this. I wonder if you would feel the same way, and I'm not making this as a joke. I wonder if you'd feel the same way about the idea of legalizing murder, but not just, and think about it this way, because I know that sounds crazy, but think about it this way. You have cases where a crazy person is attacking other people, okay? the obvious reaction is for a good Samaritan to step in and put down the assailant, the bad guy who's doing something bad. All right. You see those situations, you think to yourself, well, as a person, as a regular person, that murder is justified. But would you be surprised if I told you that some of those people who've done this exact thing end up in prison? They end up having their lives destroyed because they stepped in and decided to be a good Samaritan in a bad situation. They put the bad guy down. But there are other situations. There are other situations where perhaps somebody does something very bad to you. You know, if you're a parent and someone does something unspeakable to your child, right? The legal system will say, we need to put them in prison. Well, your instinct might tell you, and I think a lot of people in society would agree, that if you were to just go to their house and shoot them in the head, that you shouldn't have any repercussions on you. See, the thing is that those opinions, and honestly, I'm kind of on board with it, you know, on the idea of legalizing murder for those cases. If everyone used it properly and only used the legalization of murder to put down the bad guys that law otherwise would be too soft on, I think that we might have a better society. But here's the problem. When you give us control, when you give us the ability to choose everything, even down to those very particular things, we have a lot of freedom. I mean, in America, by the way, because we're in America, we have a ton of freedoms. There's so many freedoms that other places simply don't have. A lot of people throughout history never had the kind of freedoms that we have today. The fact that I can sit here on this podcast and say almost anything that comes to my mind is a level of freedom that many millions of people, billions of people throughout history have never gotten the opportunity to enjoy. But when we're talking about legalizing the idea of, you know, let's legalize murder, we could do this, but the fallout would be a lot more people would be dying. But we would have to become okay with that. We'd have to be okay with that because we would say, well, in these situations, it's permissible. I take a hardline stance. You guys who've watched the first episode or this episode, you know my opinion at this point. I haven't kept it any secret. I am pro-life. I don't believe that abortion should be allowed at all for any circumstance because I think when we compare I said this before, what is the worst situation you could give me to describe to me that would change me and make me justify even a single abortion? And I've made this challenge. I've never received an answer to which I've said yes. Yes, rape and incest happens. Yes,
What about life of the mother?
Life of the mother. Okay. In the case of the life of the mother, all right, and this is an interesting one, is killing the child a necessary thing to do in order to save the mother's life? What happens a lot of times...
Yes. The one I'm asking is yes.
Yes, and I understand that, but let me clarify something about this scenario, because this happens in real life all the time, where it'll be the choice of, okay, we can save the mother, we can save the baby. There's no guarantee that if you save the mother, that that if you save the baby, that the mother is, that the baby is going to live. Okay? Because sometimes there's a massive complication, hemorrhaging, whatever. We have to make a decision right then and there. If you're in a doctor's office, and I'll tell you this for myself, if my wife was in a doctor's office, she had a baby, something was going wrong with the baby couldn't be delivered, it was her life or the baby's. In those situations, I'm going to save my wife's life. I don't consider that to be abortion. That's not, at that point, you're not choosing to kill your child. You're choosing to save your spouse. You're choosing to save your wife. Now, you can argue against me and tell me that that's just my perspective. That's just how I decide to view the situation. But I don't care. That's my response.
Well, I don't know what to say. Well, that's a good example of how complicated this issue is and why the whole pro-life, pro-choice dichotomy is stupid. Because there's a lot of people who are pro-life who, in that scenario, would probably say the same thing as you just did. So based on the hard definition of pro-life, that doesn't fit. Because, well, I guess it does, because you were pro-life, but it was your wife's life, not your child's life. Listen,
Let me say this as well, because what you're talking about is good, and it gets into the philosophy, and it gets into the whole thing of, like, you know, you've heard of the trolley problem. Brian, I think we need a whole episode just about the trolley problem, because I don't think we've done one of those yet, or we haven't talked about it that much. It's a good thing, because if you take a pro-life perspective into the trolley problem, where someone is dying in every single scenario, it's very easy to point and say, no, you're not pro-life. You just killed somebody because of your action. I'm driving a train and it's going to hit this one guy, or I can divert it and hit 20 people. And I run over the guy.
Framing, yeah.
It's the framing of it. And here's the thing. Pro-life means that you, at the end of the day, your highest priority is life. And if you have a life versus a life, then you're going to have to make a choice between those two lives. That's not the same as making a choice between a life and whatever other different thing you want to put on there that is not a life.
Yes, and I made that point in the first episode, and that's another issue I have with the pro-choice side, is they pretend that it's an equal comparison between the baby's life and the mother's not being ready, her life being ruined, inconvenience, those things. Because in most scenarios, it's not a life versus a life. It's a life versus the mother's still alive, still living, but now her life is more complicated or whatever. So, but it's funny how that side frames it as if it is that they're identical comparisons. And somehow the people on the pro-life side are saying that a woman's life is less important than a baby's life, when that's not the comparison, because in most cases, that's not what's being chosen. It's not life versus life, it's life versus something else. But they pretend otherwise, again, for their own convenience. But your example about legalizing murder is a great demonstration of my point about how just legalizing something or having something that is morally tricky society can't be trusted to be in that kind of scenario. So sometimes if it gets abused, the only solution is to get rid of it entirely. So a scenario, you legalize murder, it goes on for a little bit, people doing it the proper way, and then suddenly people with bad intention say, oh, murder's legal, I can just kill this guy because he's dating the girl I want to date, and then now I'm in the clear, and it's totally justified and shit like that. And it snowballs and snowballs and snowballs, and eventually the only solution is, all right, now it's no longer legal at all. We're not going to no longer have these nuanced scenarios where it's acceptable, because people are finding loopholes for that too. So the only solution is to get rid of it entirely. That's where we might get at with abortion, because people are abusing it so much. As a lesser extreme example, I've used this example before. And apparently this was, based on what I've read in history books, this was the case in like the 1930s, where supermarkets, or not necessarily supermarkets, any kind of retail store, didn't have like security or like a cashier or someone ringing you up. It was just, they had the items, and then there was like a box or a register or something outside or at the entrance. And after people bought their stuff, they put in the amount of money that they spent on their items in the box or in the register, whatever it was, and walked away. And nobody was there manning that spot. Nobody was there.
Let me interject something real quick. I actually went to a national reserve, or one of those park reserve places. They had something very similar to this, where there was just a box. There was no gate. There was no automatic thing. There was no guy staying there. It was just, hey, put in $5 to come to the park, to come to this reserve. And I put the $5 in. It's Scout's honor.
But not everybody would. So now it's a social experiment, which I think I mentioned on the podcast before. Let's say we do that now at a Walmart, where items are on the shelf, there's prices on the shelf, but there's no cashiers, there's no security, there's nothing. And you can grab whatever you want, and then you can either decide, I'm going to pay the exact amount as it is, I'm going to pay more than the amount, I'm just going to give a flat $20 regardless of how much I pay, I'm going to pay nothing, I'm going to give them 1 penny. It's all up to you, and there's no penalties for no matter what you do. I mean, we all know how this would play out. Some would do the Scout's honor and say, I spent $150 on $150 on stuff, I'm paying $150 because that's the right thing to do. Other people will say, I spent $150, I only have $100, I'm putting $100 in. Some people will say, I spent $150, I only want to pay $20, so I'm paying $20. Some people will say, fuck it, I'm walking out the fucking store with everything. And so that whole thing will never be implemented in society, because not everyone can be trusted to do it properly. Same thing with abortion. If abortion was handled properly, and of course this gets into what is considered proper, I get that, but because it's definitely handled improperly, no matter what standard you use, it cannot be legalized across the entire board. So my final point to my position is, even though I think it should be legal, basically all the way up to 9 months, I get why there's pushback for that, because we as people cannot be trusted to handle it properly.
Yep. All right, listen, we're probably going to be back for the third trimester.
That's a clever joke, Zach. You came up with all that yourself?
Yeah, no, right? Yeah, all by myself. So we're going to probably be back with a part 3, because I want to dig into a little bit deeper about your opinions there. I also want to share some interesting. I was going to talk in this episode a little bit about the men's choice.
By the time we get to the third episode, you'll forget my opinion anyway, so I'm not worried. But yes.
Yeah, exactly. I'll get the refresher. So, anyway, we're gonna wrap it up, guys. Thank you so much for being here today. This is the Value Added Podcast. If you want to leave a comment, a question, you leave your opinion, you can do so at valueadded.cb@gmail.com. Of course, you can also drop a comment down in the YouTube section, the comment section, or on Spotify. Interact with the poll on this episode that Brian's gonna put out. It's gonna be great. You can find us, by the way, if you want to reach out. You can find us on X. Hopefully. And you can connect with us there as well. So we look forward to hearing from you. I want to get more about your opinions, what you guys think of this topic. And, you know, it can be complicated for some people, and there's a lot to talk about. I enjoy the fact that we can have this conversation. Even, you know, me and you, Brian, who have coming from a little bit different places, we can still talk about this. And, you know, for those of you who may be listening to this point in, who have completely the opposite opinion that I do, I think, congratulations on making it this far. I appreciate you being here. And I want to hear from you as well. So definitely reach out. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Have a good one.
And if you guys haven't been triggered yet, wait till we get to talking about the men's side of this. That's all I'm going to say for now. Have a good one, guys.